Yes, she is.
So let's run this one again. You're on your way back from East Grinstead and you reach the roundabout at Thetford.
Yeah, I was driving back. I was in the car with a relative and my daughter was in the back. And we're approaching a roundabout. Obviously, I know that road quite well. There's nothing really there. And it was obviously very dark because it was 9:30. And
On the A11?
On the A11. And there were these two bright lights and they were diamond shaped, really high up. They looked like, if you imagined a tall factory, they were like that kind of height, what you'd expect to see, really high up. And I said to the lady I was traveling with, I said, I'm not imagining something. Can you see this? And she's like, what on earth is that? So we carried on and we thought perhaps they were, I don't know, that somehow there was suddenly this factory there. And then two more started and they fizzled up and then they just sat there in the sky. So there were four of these lights sat like this kind of shape. But they were so high and so bright that the whole area of the sky around it was so bright. It was like, you know, when you look at a city and it's really lit up and it's got like an aura from it. It was so bright. And then they just went.
They kind of winked out, yeah?
Yeah, just gone. So we carried on and we were like, obviously, what on earth was that? Trying to discuss it between ourselves. We carried on past the roundabout and carried on up the A11. And then my daughter says from the back, she said, they're on the left now. And on the left-hand side of the road, they must have been miles as far as we could see above the edge of the trees. There was two of them there again, still so bright, almost like so bright. They were white. They weren't like a street light is like a yellowy color. These were like the brightest things I've ever seen. And there were two of them again on the left, and then two more fizzled, almost like the start of a firework is how it kind of looked, like a crackle, and then they just shone. And then a fifth one joined just really far back across the fields, and the same thing. They lit up the whole sky, but they didn't change shape. They just sat there glowing. I've never seen anything like it.
So were they static?
They were static. They were just like they were hovering. And the size didn't change or do anything. They just were there and then they were gone on that side. And then they just went again.
Okay. How long would you say the entire thing happened? You know, how long did it last?
It wasn't quick. It was long enough for me to say, can you see that? And then we approached the roundabout and they were still there as we approached the roundabout. And then as we pulled onto the roundabout, they were just gone. And on the left-hand side, they were there for a good couple of minutes and then just gone.
Right. And could you estimate the height or the size of the object?
They must have been really, really large. They were really high. I would say at least 100 foot up. They were really high and really.
That's not very high. That if for anything flying, that's pretty low. That's a second before you crash.
You can help me out here. The things that Nonnas when at the university, those tall circular
like a
things,
chimney,
like those
chimneys, factory chimney,
like the ones at the UEA. They're really that's clearly measurements are not my strong point. But
so when
you're doing great.
Sky, not very high for a flying thing. It sounds like the height of like a factory chimney kind of thing, something like that.
Really not very high at all.
Mm.
Yeah, which means these things must have been pretty big. And you say it lasted what, roughly 2 minutes?
Yeah, they were there for some time.
The important thing, okay, did you experience any other effects from this? I mean, did you arrive home or wherever your destination was on time, or did you seem late?
It seemed late.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth. What I'm trying to establish is whether there was any time lost. You know, were you significantly late or a little bit late?
I guess I didn't really think about it at the time, but we got home and it seemed significantly late. We actually looked at the time travelled on the clock when we pulled up outside the house because the car records it, and it didn't tally up with the time that we got home. And
That's odd,
records your
actually, 'cause you did
driving.
say to me, I remember you saying to me, oh, we got home quite late.
That is significant.
And we got
Yeah.
home, I mean, we set off at 6 o'clock and it's a 2.5 hour drive. And I messaged you. And it was late though.
Yeah.
And how long does that drive normally take?
2.5 hours.
And on this occasion, it took how long?
Over 3, which it was definitely over 3 because we couldn't figure out why the time was off on the car.
So the discrepancy was between which two time devices?
My watch.
Okay, your wristwatch.
And the car, which tracks our journey time.
What, sat nav, you mean?
No, so the car records the time it's been driving. It didn't tally up.
Oh, like what a truck driver has.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. Now, did you have any unusual dreams after this? Any night since then?
I don't know. My husband told me that I was talking in my sleep about the sizes of very large objects, but that's it.
Oh, right.
But genuinely, he said to me last night, "What were you talking about? This is so large." But apparently, I talk in my sleep, which isn't normal for me. But apart from that, that's it.
Well, again, you've got lost time. You've got out of character behavior. If you're talking in your sleep, if you do it all the time, it doesn't mean anything. But if you don't do it, and then suddenly you are doing it. Now, any headaches, dizziness, or nosebleeds?
It's eerie, Mama. I've had pretty much a constant headache since I got home.
And you did not have this headache prior to this encounter?
No. I got it when I came home. It was so bad.
You did say you had really bad
Yeah, I did.
Anything else, dizziness or nosebleeds?
No, just the headache.
Can you describe it a little bit? What kind of headache? Is it fuzzy? Is it sharp? Is it dull?
It was almost like a pressury headache is how it felt.
And do you still have it?
I've been taking ibuprofen to try and dull it so I can get on with life because it's been really uncomfortable actually.
But it's gotta say, the pieces of this jigsaw are somewhat fitting together. Rather classic kind of pattern, to be honest with you. Anything else unusual at all? Have you caught sight of anything out of the corner of your eye, almost like you thought somebody was standing there and then you turn and there's no one there? Anything like that?
I've got 2 children. They don't give me time enough to pay attention to what's going on with anything else other than them, really.
I understand that. How about ideas? Any unusual ideas or changes in your interests? Almost like an idea that doesn't feel as if it belongs to you, or suddenly you develop an interest in something that you'd never had any interest in before, anything like that?
Not really. I got home and started looking up driving instructors. That's about as exciting as it gets for new thoughts for me. I'm a terrible driver. I don't know why I thought I'd become a good one, really.
Okay, so let's go back to the actual objects for a moment. Describe them again. So you say you think they're about a factory chimney height, which is about 80 or 100 feet, maybe even less, most factory chimneys.
Maltings, like that kind of height.
Yeah, that's less than 100. I know what a maltings look like. Over in Alton Broad, we had a set of those.
Yeah,
but they're not that big.
But they were set back a bit, so I could see the trees, and then they were like a chimney.
So when you say they were set back, so they looked like they were that height, but are you saying there was some distance?
There was some distance. It wasn't like they were.
So they might have been higher than they looked to you.
Yeah,
possibly.
There is a chance because to me, they looked just set back a bit from the roundabout. So we were approaching the roundabout. I mean, it must have been like 300 yards from the roundabout. Time to have that conversation on approach, and they were quite far away. But they were diamonds, and they were just like the purest white. And it was just, they just didn't go. So it fizzled, like there was like a crackly light, and then the two more appeared. But it was almost like, you think of like a firework. I thought perhaps that was going to come into something, but it didn't. It just sat there glowing, all of them.
So there were 3 in total?
There was 4 on the right-hand side, and then 5 set back on the left-hand side.
So that's 9 altogether?
Well, they weren't all together at the same time. So
No,
we saw the
so
4
we saw
first,
4,
then they disappeared.
and
Separately.
And 5. So they were exactly the same objects, but in completely different places. And they travel. There was no way that you could physically get from that location to that location and replicate. I mean, we were driving up this like a few miles. It wasn't, and they were.
Yes. What she said to me was she couldn't believe how they could have travelled that distance so quickly.
Mm.
You also said they were in like a formation.
They
didn't
were.
you?
They were.
So they were like 4.
Yeah, like they were
just in like that, like 4. 1,
yeah,
2,
like
3, 4.
These two were like here, and those two were like that. So it was almost like they kind of made a
like a
diamond.
rhomboid.
Yeah, like a rhomboid.
Like that.
Yeah.
And then when you saw the 5?
And the 5th one just kind of came and fizzled and
you said it was a bit of a
above.
distance.
Yeah.
And the only colour was white.
Just the brightest, like clearest, purest light.
How did it feel? Did it feel religious, spiritual, or did it just feel like a light in the sky? Did it have any kind of emotional content for you?
It gave me the heebie-jeebies. But apart from that, it was just the strangest. I couldn't process what I was seeing, because it's like nothing I've ever seen
enough that
before.
you said you checked it out with the other person because you weren't sure if what you were seeing,
if I was seeing things, because it was just.
And she saw all of this as well.
Yes. As did the small
in the back of the car.
The 9-year-old in the back of the car, who just kept saying, "I can't believe what we've seen." She was just in awe of it. She thought it was just beautiful.
Your friend, have you spoken to her since? Because it might be worth checking to see if she's had any funny dreams or headaches or any of that.
We've spoken very briefly since, but not
about the night.
No, not really.
It's very common in these instances of, I've interviewed hundreds of people who've had experiences like this. Quite often you find that one of the people is kind of like you, is all right to talk about it, and the other one will blank it. Like you may find that she's very reluctant to discuss it. It's like, because some people just want to shut it out and pretend that it never happened. And even if you try and raise the subject, they'll very quickly change the subject or even tell you to stop talking about it, because some people just can't process that sort of thing.
I guess if it feels uncomfortable, that's how some people deal with it, isn't it?
Yeah, they just close the door on it. I'm not saying she will, but I'm just saying don't be surprised if she is like that. Do you have anything else at all that you'd like to add to this?
I think so. I spoke to you about it that night. Nothing that I'm missing.
I don't think so. But it's interesting talking to Jack, because Jack has asked questions that then, about the other symptoms that you may not have necessarily put together otherwise.
No, I didn't.
And let me know if anything else happens. It's quite common. Obviously you know where to find me, and are you okay if I share this information with a UFO reporting center?
Are you right with that?
I can't see what night I got home and I was googling it, and all I could find was about these lights over these bases, old RAF bases.
Old RAF bases, yeah,
in Thetford.
So
I was desperately trying to put two and two together, because when you see something like that and your brain is struggling to compute what you've seen, and it just, I couldn't wrap my head around it, and I almost felt a bit silly, which is why.
And I said, I know just the person to talk to.
Indeed, you do. And this will probably find its way onto my YouTube channel at some point. And so you're going to be stars.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely my pleasure. So if you got nothing else to add to that, I'll let you continue with your evening and go back to my cup of Ribena.
Thank you very much. I hope it's useful for you.
Can I ask if you've ever heard of or have any explanation you can put to my strange lights?
It is by the oddest, very oddest coincidence that I was sitting in this exact chair less than 24 hours ago, and I was watching a sound healing, no, not sound healing, sort of sound mysticism documentary by an American girl. I think it was all connected with ancient Egypt, and they were talking about the formation of what they called the diamond body, and they spoke about a thing in the Rosalind Chapel up in Scotland, where the body of Christ is depicted in a stained glass window, and behind him there is a double golden diamond. And apparently people go to great lengths to knowingly and deliberately construct this body of diamond gold as a part of their spiritual evolution. And that was the first thing that popped into my mind, because I said it's less than 24 hours ago that I was watching that video. That said, the way you've come across with this, it sounds more like a UFO encounter, but it is a very odd coincidence that the diamond body was, you know, kind of here with me in this realm, and it is like two diamonds placed one on top of the other.
That's exactly what it's like. But it's funny you should use the terminology of the Rosalind, because when I was looking at it in the Thetford UFO sightings, it had that kind of, I can't remember what it was called, but it had something really similar in the names of this light that was, go back and finish my Googling.
It's the one, oh, what's his name? The famous actor who did the Da Vinci Code thing. That had the Rosalind Chapel and all the sort of Knights Templar connections, all the sort of Knights of the Holy Grail and all this thing. And that I can never remember the name of the place, but it's a sacred place up in Scotland where the Holy Grail is said to have resided at some point in time. Tom Hanks, that was the actor in the Da Vinci Code, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it could be a sound-induced golden diamond that if it was that, it would suggest that you're about to encounter some kind of huge quantum leap in your spirituality. If it's not, if it's a UFO of some kind, that's a very different story, you know, that and you've obviously been affected by it. You know, you've obviously interacted with this thing more than you are consciously aware. That's quite clear. And it may be that you experience some other kind of change, you know, in the days to come. I don't be alarmed by that. I mean, you may become suddenly very artistic or more knowledgeable than you were before, or develop a keen interest in a certain subject that never interested you before. These are the sort of things that usually take place if you have a close encounter like that.
Yeah, that's really good to know, actually. If it was something like the sound waves, would it be something that we would have all seen?
Well, the fact that there was more than one witness suggests that it's not just for you, or perhaps it's for your collective group soul, in which case the whole bunch of you may have been affected by it. Or it could have been an intervention. Now, what I mean by that, an intervention is maybe there was some kind of danger present for you and whoever else was in that car, and this was an intervention to ward that off. Maybe they kind of picked you up and moved you along the road, or removed you from that road completely.
You didn't tell Jack.
Until the danger was past.
There is something else, Jack.
You've literally given me
The police cars.
There were so many
got
police
goosebumps
cars.
now.
I do. They were all going.
You said so. What? Tell Jack when the police cars came.
Literally, as the first set of lights went and the second ones appeared, and then as soon as they were gone, there was 4 or 5 police cars all going the other way.
You just reminded me when you said that, because you mentioned the police cars.
So would you have been heading in the direction that the police cars came from?
Yeah, we were.
So the police cars going back.
I mean, because we'd just gone past that roundabout, and the police cars were heading to the roundabout where we'd just come from.
You mentioned the police cars because it must have been significant in some way.
There were so many of them, and we thought it was really strange. And Adelaide said, "Oh, they're going to go get the aliens."
How many police cars are we talking about here?
4.
4. And all had their blue lights flashing and moving at speed, I take it?
Yep, going really fast in the opposite direction.
And did it occur to you at the time that the appearance of these cop cars could have been related to these objects?
Only what Adelaide said, which is my 9-year-old, who was saying that they're going to find the aliens, because that's what she decided they were.
Well, she may have been right. Well, it's always worth hanging on for that extra couple of minutes, isn't it? You know, to get the bit that everybody had forgot up to that point. But it sounds to me like an intervention. I can't prove that. Nobody can. But it's been known before. You know, I've heard of some fairly stunning interventions when it comes to stuff like that. You know, especially where children are involved. A lady over in the States was telling me just the other day of something just like that, where her little girl was on a bike and it was scooting at speed towards a truck, and it just passed straight through it. And what? She came out on the other side, still riding the bike, and the guy screeched to a halt and got out and looked, and he couldn't believe it. And there was quite a lot of witnesses to this. They all saw it, and the girl just rode on unharmed. So this sort of thing does happen, and it cannot happen, you know, by material means. If you know, if you were linked to the purely material world, there would have been but it didn't. So some force controlling time. This is the word that people always try to avoid. But time is the secret. You move out of time. So what's the difference between a seat that's got somebody in it and a seat that's empty? Whether the guy just got up and left or not. 5 minutes ago, he was in that seat, and now he's not. The chair is empty. So if you can control time, you can control whether a space is full or empty.
Now you said that, it almost feels like perhaps that's so right. I mean, the weather was awful. We'd had some really close calls. I said to you that we aquaplaned half the way down the M25 because it was so torrential we couldn't see. I don't know. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, the weather was really appalling. You did say that.
It was 50-mile-an-hour winds. There were trees down. It was raining torrentially the whole way. At some points, the wiper blades couldn't keep up with the sheer amount of water.
It's starting to point that way then. I think somebody just dipped in their fingers and lifted you out of the timeline and then sort of dropped you back in when they felt the going was safe again. But that's just me. I'm not trying to, you know, put that thought too much into your mind. That's just how it feels.
It's really good to get another perspective on it, because I just couldn't wrap my head around the whole thing, really, down to not really understanding what happened, whereas with the time, like the actual time where it took us so much longer than the car and everything else, it was just the most bizarre.
It's good to talk it through.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's your headache now?
It's still there.
still there. So it's just sometimes if you kind of get to the bottom of something, it resolves itself.
Mm.
But one thing you could try is write on a piece of paper what you really want to know about this. Okay, to whatever force you believe in. All right, down by many names. So address it to that particular force and ask who or what were those diamonds, why were they here, and put it under your pillow when you go to bed. And read it aloud 3 times and then put it under your pillow and see if you dream or if an answer comes to you when you wake up.
I will. Definitely. Thank you for that advice.